Let's talk to Sue Firth. She's a psychologist. Sue, it's so lovely to talk to you again. It seems like only a fortnight ago. How are you, Sue? You well?
I'm good, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a funny subject, actually, because I did this myself when I was in my early 20s. I had a job which I just don't think I was particularly enjoying. I was unhappy. I was miles away from home. And I think that combination of trying to make friends, trying to make it work, just didn't quite happen for me. And I came home. I wasn't reluctant to come home. I'm not certain my parents fell over themselves about the whole thing. And it was more to do with the boundaries. How do you discuss what time I come in anymore? Or how do I check in with them whether or not it's all right to do certain things? Can I bring friends home? Can I have a dinner party? You know, there are all sorts of things that as a young person you might still feel you want to do. And it's a bit more difficult to do when you're actually trying to respect your parents' house.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is. It is. I was saying this earlier. It can be brilliant. It can be fantastic. And we heard a really positive story before the news. But for some people, on the children's side, they've lived away, so they've had independence and they've been able to do what they want when they want, and what have. And to a certain degree, obviously the parents are in the same situation, aren't they? They've carved out their life without their children living at home, and they've got new interests. They've perhaps used the empty rooms for other purposes. So there is a huge potential for conflict, isn't there?
Yes, there genuinely is. And I think you have to be very prepared to have several conversations about it and to actually, in a way, contract with each other. What's your expectation? What's mine? How can we meet each other halfway? How can I respect your home at the same time? I would really appreciate this. Thank you. And I think that's the genuine reason. If you're actually coming back because you genuinely need it, then you're going to be grateful. And I think your whole attitude towards it's going to be good. But I've just taken both of my two to uni. And to be quite frank, I'm rather hoping they're not going to come back too early.
Yes. You and many others. My producer Mike is leaping up into the air at the moment and doing air fist pumps and what have you. I think he's in very much the same situation that you are, Sue, as well. I think changing the locks is a bit rude, though, Mike. Anyway,
I mean, one of them's actually struggled somewhat more than I expected. A certain amount of homesickness, but then it is very early, and I think it is quite a shock to their system. They are forced out into the process of learning both how to cope and also all the business of budgeting and in that sense. But once that's all under their belt and they have developed that sense of independence, it's almost counterintuitive for them to come back. Unless, of course, in a way, we are each helping each other, as you heard your previous caller, because with young children, it's super beneficial to have built-in grandparents who can look after them.
That's for sure.
Two, I think, would probably still be in their 20s at that stage, and I'd probably only be doing it for a couple of years and more or less say that from the beginning.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, I don't know if you heard, but, I almost got an frosty, a very polite, oh, yes, it'd be lovely if you dropped your own son on the way home so they could babysit for me. But I don't think they were going to do it at all. So do you think, we hear about prenuptial agreements. Do you think a pre-moving back home agreement is something sensible to have written down?
Yes, I wouldn't discount it. I mean, I don't think it has to be particularly formal, I hereby say, or something similar. I think you just have to be prepared to have some common sense, open conversations about it and be very honest. I'm not, so the young person would say, I'm not expecting to do this indefinitely, but I really would appreciate it if it was a 12-month process. And I think if you have dare I say, a boundary or an expectation in place and there is an end goal, you feel as if the individual is making a plan rather than drifting. And I think it's a fear as a parent that your child is going to drift even when they are in their 20s.
And I suppose from the children's point of view as well, can they kind of see it as a step backwards?
There is a risk of that. I think in my case, I felt that it was I actually wanted to come home, and I think that sense of home and it being more than just your parents, it's a physical space. It's an attitude, it's an atmosphere, it's everything you come back for is actually quite precious if you are in a difficult headspace, and I was at the time. But I certainly came out of that quite quickly. So I would have said that by the time I came out of it quickly, I should have been the one instigating the next chat, which said, right, I'm ready to go again, is that okay? And I think that's why, you can't plague your young person and pepper them with questions every month. Are you going yet? Are you going yet?
Yeah.
Because I think you just make it really unpleasant. So you've got to just keep an open dialogue and genuine expectations. Plan it rather than they simply turn up. Think it through, but then make sure that it feels right for both of you to do it. If it doesn't, then you can find a solution, can't you? If you've got a few pennies, then I suppose you help your child move into rented accommodation in the short term and see whether or not that helps by bringing them nearby but not into the house.
It's what we were saying earlier as well. It's good to have, all right, perhaps not written in stone, but penciled in a potential end date.
Yeah, an end date and a backup plan, I think, is really how you would do this in ideal circumstances. But, you know, it really is unfortunate, rather expensive still, to be able to buy for yourself. So if you are indirectly going to help your kids by allowing them to come back, because that way they put some savings to one side so that those savings effectively work as a deposit for something, then you've facilitated that. As long as the whole situation doesn't become really unpleasant, because it can deteriorate into a bit of a bickering fest, I think, in certain circumstances. So, you know, you've got to be brave as well. You've got to be brave enough to say, you know what, actually, you're in your mid-20s now, you've been here for 2 or 3 years, what are we going to do about this? And I think those open dialogues are always going to be for the better.
Just thinking about it in kind of general terms, perhaps not so much just moving back in, but the whole parent-child relationship in 2018. I know I was working in the office a few months back and looking into parents and children, adult children, and their parents, then going on holiday together and spending spare time together as mates as opposed to parents. How has the relationship changed in this day and age? And is it because, you know, we're more accessible with mobile phones, the internet, social media, things like that?
Yes, I would say that's part of it. I would also compound that by the fact that I think both of my kids, although we've talked about empty nest in the past, are actually still very much in need of me. And I think as parents, that's because we have problem-solving ability, we have greater maturity, we have experienced a certain amount of life. We know from that point of view that it requires a certain amount of skill. And I don't think our kids are always equipped for all those different situations. So they still lean on us. And I think that leaning is the beginning of determining a slight shift from telling them what to do to advising them. And that advisory capacity becomes more of a friendship. Then they start to develop a bit of an appreciation of you. And that's great. Then you can turn into more, not quite peers, but you are mentoring or coaching more. And I think that shift is a good one. And people are usually, you know, young people in their 20s are usually super grateful for it.
Do you think it's a good natural thing to be friends with your parents, or should there always be a divide? I've
been asked before to come on the radio and talk about, you know, a mother who's been prepared to go clubbing with her daughter before. I think if I'm very honest, there are limits. It wouldn't be something I'd want to do, because I feel very, very different in age to my daughter. I wouldn't want to wear her clothes. So I think there are personal limits, but they probably are more personal than I'm going to write in concrete. And I think, you know, with a suitable discussion with her, she would never want me to hang around if she's got friends over. So there are limits to it. But I think it's extremely important to realise I still have something to offer her, and she still has something to offer me. And I think it's that sharing and that fun and that friendship which deepens as you get older, and that's precious and still bonds them and helps them feel they can come home should they need. That's very important for mental health too.
Sue, thanks so much for joining us again here at BBC Radio Can. I love talking to you. That's Sue Firth, a psychologist.